Welcome to this very special edition of StonesCast, something we hope will be a fairly regular occurrence moving forwards, where we step away from the usual format of inviting Stones fans to come and talk about the tribulations of watching the team on the pitch. Today, I'm going to welcome a very special guest, someone who will be very familiar to Stones fans of the last 10, nearly 15 years now, a player that has amassed pushing 300 appearances for the Stones. I'd like to welcome to the table Mr. Alex Dyer. Alex, how are you, sir?
Yeah, very well, Hilsey. How are you, mate?
Yeah, very good, thank you. And thank you for taking the time to come and join us. As I say, this is the first kind of special that we're doing of the Stones cast. So you get that dubious honour of being the guinea pig. This is a new format for us as well, being online. Now, I'm going to start with the sycophantic bit and say, for me, who supported the Stones kind of since the turn of the century, you've been a fairly regular figure in that. And we recently, probably about a year ago, did a poll of sort of Stones' greatest modern era player. You got my vote. It's been a pleasure to watch you across your two spells, kind of either end of your career, maybe not wanting to draw too many conclusions. But I'd like to just kind of step through your career, kind of the ups and downs. It's been what I really call a fascinating career that's taken you globetrotting, has seen you have some tremendous achievements in the game. And I don't know how many Stones fans really know about that. So, you know, I'm really, really excited about the opportunity of just exploring it with you. So let's kind of go right back to the start. You were born in Sweden, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so my mum's Swedish, my dad's Caribbean, but born and raised in England. Yeah, so both me and my older sister, we were born in Sweden, but sort of moved to England straight away. I think, yeah, my mum sort of wanted us born in the country so that we would have the citizenship, and I think obviously she was just probably more comfortable there. And then, but I've sort of grown up English, I would say, as I've been here since I was about 6 weeks old.
Fair. And football throughout your childhood, was that a regular thing? Were you always kind of destined to be a footballer?
It's funny because I actually asked my mum a few months ago, and I asked her what I was like as a kid, as a baby sort of thing, and she said from the age of sort of 18 months to 2 years old, I just always had a ball with me. And I mean, my earliest memories were always of sort of playing football in the park with my friends, and I joined a team when I was very, very young. And it's weird, it's almost been my identity through my life. Since I was a kid, I always had the dream of being a footballer, and then there was sort of no other eventuality. And yeah, so I've been lucky and blessed to be able to have done it for as long as I have.
Fair. And so you said there you were kind of London born and raised, not born, raised. But your first kind of break in the professional game was with Northampton Town, who I think you went through the academy with, right? Tell us a little bit about kind of that journey with the Cobblers.
Yeah, so I mean, I joined Northampton when I was 15. I was actually there was quite a lot of players from my team in my area that sort of played for Arsenal, Tottenham. They all got picked up pretty young, and I've just played pretty much Sunday League up until I was 15. Got picked up by Northampton, and it sort of accelerated quite quickly. I went in there sort of as a 15-year-old and went straight into the under 18s. Then joined as a scholar, so I'd done a 2-year scholarship. I was pretty much with the first team from halfway through. I'd say my first year as a scholar. Signed professional quite early, so signed professional my second year, and yeah, made my debut. Had some amazing experiences there. Yeah, I remember I made my debut in, it was a Carling Cup game. I don't think it was called the Carling Cup then. It was against Middlesbrough, so that was a massive day for me and my family. All my family came to watch.
And how old would you have been at that point?
I just turned 17, so I think I was 17 in a few months. I was a baby, no facial hair then. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. And Middlesbrough at the time, I think they were in the Premier League at the time, and they had some amazing players. So it was a massive occasion for me. Played well. I think I was there 3 years as a pro. I sort of in and out, never really established myself in the team. Um, and then yeah, ended up getting released. I think when I was 20. I think yeah, just before I was 21. So, but I had really good times there. Obviously, I moved there. It was the first time I'd moved away from my home. So I lived up there, and obviously came back to London as much as I could. But yeah, it sort of helped me grow up as a young boy.
You mentioned there about sort of the youthful looks and experiences. I found this picture on the internet. It's probably going to render not very well, but
Oh gee! Oh my goodness!
it's a very youthful Alex Dyer there with in the Northampton days. And am I right in thinking that at that era of Northampton Town, that was kind of League One, League Two? I think that was kind of the league looking at about 2007, 2008. This was right.
Yeah, that's right. So when I broke through, we were in League One. I think we had a couple of seasons, and then we went down to League Two. But
Yeah.
League One at the time was as strong as it's ever been. It ever has been, I think, because you
Hmm.
had Leeds, Southampton, Leicester, Swansea. You had some massive teams that have gone on, obviously, to play in
Yeah.
the Championship and then Premier League, and they had the same sort of players and managers at the time. Had really high profile managers. So yeah, it was a really good league to be a part of and come through at the time. Luton as well, I think it was. So yeah, no, it was a really enjoyable time.
And I'm just looking at the dates and wondering whether your career at that point crossed over with another player you probably played with at the Stones a little bit later, Scott McLeish.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Scotty. Scotty was there. He was at Northampton just as I was coming through, and he was towards the end of his career. He was brilliant. He was always really, really good with the young boys. I don't think I played with him at Wealdstone. I think I'd left by the time he then come to play for
right.
Wealdstone. Yeah, no, Scotty. I remember I met him on holiday actually. I was on a plane. I think we were going to America, and I met him when I was young. And I sort of looked at him, and I was like, oh, he won't remember who I am. And he comes straight over, and
Fair.
anyone that knows Scotty, they know what he's like. He's yeah, just a top guy, top pro. Had yeah, an unbelievable career. But yeah, he was good as gold with me. So I always hold him in high regard.
Fair. So, as you said, you were kind of in and out there for sort of 3 years, and then in 2010, you found your way to Grosvenor Vale for the first time. Um, Gordon Bartlett, of course, would have been the manager there. Just tell us a little bit about how that came about, what your expectations were about dropping down to kind of Isthmian League level from where you'd been.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. I think it was my first realization of how tough football can be and how quickly things can change, both for good and for bad. And um, so I got released, and I remember my agent at the time was like, "Yep, I'll get you another League Two club, no problem. It'll be easy." Ended up going on trial at a few clubs in pre-season, and I think I ended up at Kettering, and I think they were in the conference at the time. Had a really good trial there, and I was there for about a month, I think, and they were going through financial difficulties, but they said, "Nope, we're definitely going to sign you, no problems." So I sort of planned for that. Then it got to the stage where I wasn't getting offered anything, and I couldn't really wait any longer. And then it sort of come to, I think it was September, October time. Didn't have a club. Run out of my severance pay that I had from Northampton, and I sort of thought, okay, what's going to happen here? And um, Wealdstone was pretty much the only club that wanted me at that time. I guess I wasn't very desirable as a player. I hadn't played that many games. And yeah, Gordon took me in at the time, and I'll be honest, it was a really really difficult adjustment at the time because I was angry. I sort of felt like, oh, I'm too good to be here, and you have that as a youngster. You think you're the man before you've actually proved it. And I went there with sort of chip on my shoulder, and then I remember I found myself out of the team a couple of months in, and then on the bench, and that's when I sort of looked at myself and I was like, okay, like this can go one of two ways. You can either accept that this is where you are and give everything to sort of improve the situation, or you can just sulk and then you just end up dropping out of the game. And I just love football too much, and then I just sort of took it upon myself to really knuckle down. And yeah, the club were amazing for me in terms of me finding my identity as a footballer. I think you can only really do that when you play 30, 40 games in a season, and you experience the ups and downs. It's difficult when you come in for 5 games or you play 2 games and then you're in, you're out. You can't really find your identity and who you are on the pitch. So yeah, an extremely important foundational time for me.
Do you remember your first game for the Wealdstone?
I can't remember the first league game. I remember I played pre-season. I think it was Hendon or something. I can't remember my first actual game.
I think I need some stat will probably tell me I'm wrong here, but I believe your first game was the 20th of September 2010 in a 3-0 defeat to Carshalton Athletic. That may be a competitive game.
Was that home? Was that home or away?
I think that was at home.
Carshalton. I remember going away to Carshalton. I can't remember that exact game, but it sounds about right. End of September.
And your first goal. Do you remember your first goal?
No, this is going to be really interesting. No, I can't remember.
So again, as long as my stats are correct, but your first goal was 9th of November 2010 in a 4-3 home win against Croydon Athletic, who had Marcus Bettinelli in goal for them that day, who's gone on to play, I think he's with Chelsea now.
No way.
Croydon
Athletic. Cannot remember that goal. Even if you showed me, that's so strange. Yeah, I can't remember that one.
I think that was probably just before we got the regular highlights on YouTube. We might have someone's phone at some point. But
I'll put it in the top corner against Bettinelli. We'll just say that.
Yeah, the crowd that day at the Vale as a home game was 310. And we'll come on obviously to discuss Wealdstone and the current guys and your second spell with the club. Yeah. But just looking at that era, kind of from sort of 2010 up to I think 2013 was when you left the club. Mm-hmm. It was a period where Wealdstone really started their ascendancy with a couple of failed playoff attempts. I think you left the season before the Ryman winning season in 2013-14. But it was clearly Wealdstone in the ascendancy at that point. When you reflect back on that era of your career, what do you reflect on? Do you see it very positively? Do you have any regrets? Any particular moments that stand out?
Unbelievably grateful first is what I would say, because like I said, it was foundational in terms of me finding myself as a footballer and giving myself my confidence back and feeling like a good player again when you're at a fragile age where you're not sure what's going to happen. You're not sure if you're going to be a footballer or not. And so it was a massive time for me in that. I had regrets in terms of performances because we were always very good teams. We're always up the top. I remember we had a couple of playoff runs, and then I remember we went out to the Cowleys, Concord. We had one season, and we had lower stuff. I think the season before, and it was just like I always felt we were so good, and we should have got promoted. And I was really disappointed, obviously, not to get promoted with the team. Was obviously buzzing after I'd left that they went straight up. I was, because I felt like I was almost a part of it still, because the team had kept a lot. But I mean, it was a brilliant time because, especially at that age, there was a lot of players that were coming in similar age as me, sort of, that had just been released. Obviously, James Hammond was a good teammate of mine. He'd sort of just been released, and we had the same sort of journey. Then you had your lone players like, I remember Britta Sombalonga, Gavin Massey, Connor Smith. Like you had Tommy Hoban. Like there was a lot of young players that sort of would come from the teams, and Wealdstone was the same for all of us. It was like our sort of first step into first team football and actually finding yourself and playing 30-40 games, because like I said, I played League 1 and 2, but I wouldn't say that I did, because when you play 4 or 5 games, you're not actually established there. But yeah, so it's one that's tinged with a bit of regret in terms of performance. And I remember our goal at the time was to get promoted, and I felt like we were so close. But no, other than that, it was just extremely positive. The people around the place always treated me amazingly well. It's a very close-knit club, and I've only got good memories.
And I may not register particularly highly on your radar, but I believe you were part of the squad, and I think you scored in the Middlesex Senior Charity Cup final at the end of the 2011 season against Hamworth Villa. And I think that's the last time we won, aside from obviously the National League South, a local cup competition, which has been few and far between. We don't even enter it anymore, which is a shame. But minor little one there. Now, as you're as the curtain came down on your first spell at Wealdstone, obviously Sweden comes, but there was that little gap in between where you went to Welling
Yeah, that's right.
and won the Conference South, I think, in your one season there. Is that right?
No, I actually joined them after they'd won the Conference South. So
Right, sorry.
yeah,
So you
so
went
I
up to the
joined them.
conference.
Yeah, I joined them in the summer. So I'd left Wealdstone. I think we just lost to Concord, and I sort of knew that I was leaving. That's why I was, yeah, it was upsetting loss that one was. But then, yeah, so in that summer as well, it was an important summer for me because I went to the great, because I'd studied whilst I was at Wealdstone. I'd studied with Open University. I'd done a sort of certificate in accounting, and that qualified me for Great Britain University team. So I sort of went for trials there. An ex-teammate was a manager, Steve Guinan, or he was assistant manager, so sort of recommended me. So I ended up going to the tournament with them. Had an amazing time. We were in Russia for 3 weeks. We're sort of staying in like, it's sort of like a mini Olympic village. So unbelievable experience. One that still is still with me, and we managed to finish second. We lost out to, I think it was France in the final. So that I had that, and that sort of overlapped a little bit with pre-season, and then eventually, yeah, went to Welling.
And so you spent, I'm not even sure it was a full season with Welling before you went back towards your roots in Sweden.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
signed.
So yeah, that's right. So I went to Welling, who were in the conference at the time. And again, the conference was quite strong at the time. You had like
Mhm.
Luton, Forest Green, and some other big clubs, and it was sort of a step up for me at the time because I'd went from the Ryman to obviously the conference, off the back of a good summer as well, which I enjoyed. I remember I quit my job at the time. I had a job at the time, and I sort of like I was just going to give everything for a year. I sort of gave myself a year. I said, right, Welling conference, I'm just going to give everything I've got and then just see what can happen. And luckily, it was around November time. I got a call from the manager that managed us in the summer in Russia for the Great Britain University team, and he was best friends with Graham Potter, so they'd come through. I think they studied together at, I want to say, Loughborough or one of those universities, and they worked together closely and they've become really close. Um, so that manager sort of called me and he said, "Oh, would you be interested in going to Sweden?" I said, "Yeah, of course." Thinking nothing would come of it. And I remember Graham come to one of my games. This would have been November times. He come to one of my games. I think we had, yeah, it was Luton. I remember we beat Luton. It was in the FA Cup, I think it was. So a perfect game for him to come to. And then after that, we met sort of in December, and he offered me a contract on the back of that. And it was a funny time because I remember I met him at a travel lodge it was in the middle of Cheshunt, and he was driving all around the country just trying to get players to sign for him in Sweden. We met him, and his wife was with him with his 1 year old, and he sort of got his laptop out showing me how they play and saying how I would fit in, and sort of selling it to me in essence. And yeah, within a couple of minutes of meeting him, I was like, "Yep, I was sold." Just the style of football he wanted to play, and how hungry he was, and just even in that meeting, how much he made me feel valued, and showed me a clear vision of what it was going to look like going out there. Yeah, and then I think literally a couple of weeks later, I was, yeah, because I'd signed a non-contract with Welling to allow myself the opportunity to leave whenever I want. I think my last game with Welling was around end of December, and then start of January I flew out to Sweden.
And so that would have been because the Swedish is it's a summer season, right? For
Yeah.
football out in Sweden, so you would have joined during pre-season. And just to sort of, I guess for everyone listening's perspective, Ostersunds were a fairly new team. I think we're an amalgamation of a number of teams. They're one of the most northerly teams in Sweden. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
They had been on a journey, right? They'd gone. I think Graham had been there for 3 or 4 years already, and taken them from, I think, what was the 4th tier, and you joined in the Superettan, which is their equivalent of the Championship, right?
Exactly.
And of course, I say of course, Ostersunds and Graham's journey and the time that you spent there was one of incredible progress. I think in your first season, then you were promoted from the Superettan behind Jönköping, was it? See if
Yeah,
my
you're
memory
shopping.
serves
So
me correct.
the second season I was there. Yeah.
And just like, what is the experience like of playing at that level in Sweden, but also abroad? How does it differ from kind of the English game?
It sort of opened my eyes to it because we're quite closed off in England, and obviously because the Premier League's marketed as the best league in the world, we always think that okay, you either make it in England to the Premier League or you've not failed, but it's not viewed as successful to go to these other leagues, and we don't really watch, like, they're not marketed. We don't really watch them, so we don't really know about these other leagues. And I was the same when I went to Sweden. I thought, oh, like I wonder how good it is, and then when you actually go over there, and then I remember the first game I played in the stadium, and I was just like, this is unbelievable. And the the style of football and the quality of the facilities and the fans, like the atmosphere, that the fact that the fans used to bring is it was incredible. I mean, I didn't know what I was going into. I remember he offered me a 3-year contract, and I was a bit nervous. So I only wanted to sign 2 because I was like, oh, what if I don't like it? What if the standard of football's not that great? And it was, yeah, absolutely transformative for me because it sort of showed me that okay, football. I hadn't experienced football at the top level. I hadn't experienced the Premier League where
Mhm.
the best pitches, the best balls, and you're playing out from the back and all of that. I played in League One, League Two, National League, and Ryman when they were in the midst of rough and tumble. No one was playing out. There was no football being played, and then sort of going out there, it was like it opened my eyes that oh, teams actually do play in different styles. And for me, who was never the most physically blessed, but was blessed in other ways, it sort of heightened and highlighted my strengths. So it was something that was, like I said, transformative and sort of opened my eyes to, oh wow, there is football outside of England.
Fair. I'm just going to try and pop something on screen here because there's some
Oh
fabulous
God,
footage here.
no more
This is
pictures, please.
no.
So I remember this.
I'm trying to turn that volume down. So that's I think this was July 2016, if I remember the date right. So
Yeah,
this is a goal. Was this in the Allsvenskan? Do
yeah,
you
this was
remember?
our Allsvenskan. So obviously the season before, Jönköping had they got promoted in first place and we were second. So we always had a rivalry with them and we were always going back to back. And I remember this game was my first game back. I'd been injured. I hadn't been injured in Sweden for the whole time I was out there. I played every game, and then I was out for a couple of weeks, I think, and this was my first game back. So um, yeah, this was in the summer. This was a big goal because we not hated each other, but we had a friendly rivalry where we sort of would go against each other quite a lot. So yeah, that was good times.
And just tell me about kind of those couple of years playing in the Allsvenskan, because obviously there were some serious players like Kim Kalfstrom, I think was playing in Sweden at that point. What kind of memories do you have? Come on, name drop a few players that you either played with or played against. Who was your toughest opponent?
Do you know what? Again, Sweden. You don't. Well, I think when I was in it, I was sort of the mentality that I was telling myself, I'm the best. I need to prove myself to everyone. I don't care who I play against, and I'm the best. They're playing against me. That's who I was and I was very much like blinkered to who I was playing against, the stadiums I was playing against, and the players and the teams. But like when I look back now, I think there were some unbelievable players that we played against. So the one that obviously stands out is Alexander Isak. So I played against him. So he played 1 season and he was 16 years old. I remember this. So there was massive talk about him before we first played them, and then we'd obviously Graham used to clip up all of the game or all of the analysis. So before we played AIK, there are 2 strikers, it was Isak and another guy called Abassi who was unbelievable as well. So he played in Hoffenheim and and it was funny because a lot of the games he would tell us, okay, well, this game, like they're not that good. We just keep them this side, and then they'll give us the ball back, and we'll be fine. He said, hey, okay, they're a good team, but he's like, if they get the ball in the box, we're done. So it was just literally like we need to stop the ball from getting in the box around these two, and then he just showed us 5 minutes worth of clips of these two just combining 1-2s, finishing, scoring, like they were just unbelievable. And then playing against Isak. Obasi was unbelievable as well, but then Isak, he was just skinny as anything. He was 16 years old, but just his game intelligence, his aura, his like speed, his touch, everything, just an absolute complete player. He was, at 16, it was just, it didn't even make sense. So he had one season and then he ended up going, I think he went Dortmund after that. But I think the best midfielder I come up against is one that people wouldn't really know. His name's Rasmus Elm. Um, he's a sort. So he played for Sweden, obviously quite a bit, and he went to he ended up going to I think Russia. But he's the sort of midfielder that if you're a midfielder and you play against him, you understand how good he is. From the outside, you might look and be like, oh, like he's okay, he plays some nice passes, but he just sees the game in a way that you just don't like. I couldn't even understand. Like you go and try and press him, he just plays around you. He positions himself in a place where you can't get close to him. Um, Duels as well. He's massive, so he could win duels, headers, but he could play short, long. Just an unbelievable footballer. Like there were some others like that obviously ended up playing for Sweden, like Victor Claesson I play against. Obviously, I was teammates with Ken Seymour, Simon Ghoddos, who ended up playing in the Premier League, and
Yep.
Movie Barrow. But yeah, I would say Isak and Elm, they're the two that really stand out as a level above.
I'm just going to pop up a little picture of your time at the
That's
Sun
me
there.
just moaning at people. That sounds about right. That looks about
You got that captain's armband on there, which must have been
right.
a huge privilege to captain a side in the Allsvenskan. And
Yeah,
you're sorry, go on.
yeah, it was amazing because so the first season I wasn't captain. And I remember towards the end of the season, he gave me the armband a few times, and then he called me in at the start of the next season with the captain that had been the one before, and then he just sort of identified me as the leader of the team, and um, it was a massive honor. And because I looked up to, and remember, this is Graham before he was Graham Potter, who he is now, but
Mm-hmm.
all of us, we just sort of worshipped him like almost. He was just so unbelievably good at his job and good at sort of taking care of you as a person rather than just like an object or a player that just has a value. Um, and yeah, so for him to identify me as the sort of leader of the group and then give me the captaincy, it meant a huge amount to me.
He was very much a pioneer of that style of football that obviously eventually got him the job at Swansea after he left
Yeah.
Ostersunds. Had you ever come across anyone like him in your sort of career up to that point?
No, it wasn't even close. Like, and that's not no disrespect to other managers, but I think especially in England, and I think Graham made the right decision by starting in Sweden because in England at the time it was well, I guess it still is. It's just survival. You just have to survive. So there is no implementing a style over a long period of time. There is just panic. We need to think as soon as things get a bit rough. The safest way to play is to be direct and to just play the percentages and just try and nick something. But he went there and sort of built his culture and his thing and people look at it from the outside and it's like, oh, Austin, they just went on a journey and they were amazing. But I remember there was a game before we went to before we got promoted. So so this was the start of our promotion season pre-season. We lost 7-0 in a pre-season game, and then it was crisis emergency because we were over budget and we had to get promoted that year, and it was like it it wasn't working. But it was just he then had the time and the trust to be able to implement how he wanted to play regardless, and we bought into it. And I think as any footballer, 90% of footballers want to play in a style where you're possession dominant, where you can express yourself as a football. When you're a kid playing football in the playground, you want as many touches of the ball as possible. You run
Mm-hmm.
around like crazy to get it. You're not just like, okay, well, I just want to stand here and just boot it up the pitch and run. Like that's not why people get, or that's not why I believe that children want to play football, or that's certainly not how I brought up. I just wanted loads of touches of the ball. I don't want to be involved all the time. And yeah, he was a pioneer at the time, and it was like when we got promoted to the top league, it was even then, and Sweden had an okay style of football, but even when we went up and it was like we were a tiny club and we were ball dominant against Malmo, against AIK, against Hammarby, against Djurgården. It was like, what the hell is going on? And I remember we had so much media coverage because it was like, this is crazy. They're not allowed to do this. And I remember we'd play teams and they'd get so frustrated and they'll just try and crazy press us and just be like, oh, these are a lot of rubbish, and then we'll just pop it around them. And then it was like, oh wow. And it was, but again, it was just belief that he would instill in us, that us as people were playing against 11v11. We had a clear structure. Everyone, there's no feeling like it as a footballer when you go on the pitch and you know exactly what you're going to do. I believe that's what confidence comes from. A lot of players say, a lot of people or fans will say, oh, he's just not got confidence at the minute. And I think a lot of confidence comes from, okay, I'm going on the pitch. I know exactly what the manager wants of me, and what he wants of me is aligned with my strengths. So he doesn't want Alex to stand on the right wing and beat his man one on one or win loads of headers. He's
Mhm.
like, okay, Alex, I need you in small spaces, intricate, use your brain, and I want you to cover a lot of distance. And for me, that it suited me. So going out into a game knowing exactly my role and knowing that it aligns with my strengths, that's what he was great at.
Just you saying that, I'm going to pop something else on the screen because when I saw this, and I think this is from a pre-season friendly later on in your career when you're at Lillestrøm, but
Yeah.
I looked at this and thought, this to me, this clip, let me just pop it on screen now. I think, see if you agree, I think this is sort of you down to a T if it's going to describe you as a player. Has that come up? Do you recall it?
Oh yeah, this was against Mulder.
But yeah, you picking the ball
Yeah.
up, driving from midfield, and I think getting on the end of it as well.
Yeah, I looked quick there, didn't I? Bloody hell.
But to me, as a fan, especially having watched you come through that first part of your career with Wealdstone,
Mm.
this is how I will, remember you as that box to box player, intelligent with the ball, and maybe just put that up just to share it. But your career at Ostersunds then came to an end, I think, at the end of the 2016 season.
Yeah.
And you stayed in Sweden and you transferred to Elfsborg, who were further down south in the town of Borås, I believe
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
called. Tell us what happened. How did that come about? Why did your journey with Graham end 2016?
It was a bit. I mean, Elfsborg were a bigger club, and at the time they were better. They'd finished higher in the league, and I think that last season I was very much like I was out of contract at the end of the year, and I was given everything, and I'd had a really good season in terms of my production and just my general play. Um, and yeah, they come in for me, and it was an opportunity to sort of test myself, and I think I always get a sort of itch as a player when, or at that time, it was like, okay, I've proved myself. I'm captain. I know I'm going to play every single game. The system and the style suits me to a T. But at the time, I was so hungry. I wanted a new challenge, and it was like at the time, no one had made big moves into Europe from Ostersund. So I was like, I'd been playing well for the last 2, 3 seasons, and I hadn't really got a move. I'd looked at Elfsborg's history and their history as a club in the league, and they're a fantastic club, um, and a really big history. And a lot of players had moved on from there. It was sort of a ground where, okay, you play well for a season and then you move on. So I sort of went there with that in mind, thinking, okay, I can just go and replicate what I do here there, and which was probably a bit naive because, like I said, Graham had put me in a system that completely highlighted all of my strengths and sort of negated my weaknesses as a player.
Mhm.
And then I went into a team that was very much in transition, a club that was in transition. The manager I sort of signed for, who'd sold me the club, it was he'd lost the dressing room, and as soon as we'd gone in, there was a sort of like, right, we need to get the manager out, and then it was just like, oh wow, what have I sort of come into here? I actually remember, I don't think I've said this, but in the summer, so it was about 3, 4 months after I got there, I realized like they're not using me how I need to be used. I'm sort of playing out of position. It doesn't highlight my strengths, and I remember I called Graham, and then we'd set up for me to go back, I said I don't care, because I got a sign-on fee and stuff like that. I was like, I don't care, I'll pay all the money back or whatever. So I think I was going to go back on loan. Yeah, we'd sort of organised the loan, so it was all sort of agreed. And then I remember I was in England, and the last day of the window, the manager, who wasn't actually playing me at the time, called me and said, "Oh, I'm not letting you leave." And the worst thing is, I knew the manager was due to get sacked as well. So he didn't let me leave to sort of go back on loan, because I wanted to just be myself again as a footballer.
Mhm.
But then it didn't work out, and like, that's football. But yeah, so that's how that went.
It's interesting. You said there, like, Elfsborg were a sort of a bigger or more richer club than Ostersunds. I'm going to pop something on screen again. I was just looking at kind of what various footage, and let me just pop this up, which was quite interesting. This press conference. Have you been announced? Have you seen this?
Oh yeah, I haven't watched this back, I don't think.
I mean, it's a 14-minute long video where you get the Elfsborg shirt on. It also made me realise, aside from just being kind of born in Sweden, you are fluent in Swedish.
Yeah, so to be fair, Elfsborg helped me out a lot, because so obviously in Ostersund, the manager was English, all the meetings were done in English, and pretty much everyone was English. But I mean, being half Swedish, I didn't know any Swedish at the time, but I was thinking, okay, I've signed a 2-year contract at the time when I first went, and I was like, right, I really want to learn the language. If anything, if I go back after a year, at least I've sort of grown a skill, which I'd always sort of regretted, because I have Swedish family, and it would have been nice to be able to speak to them. So I remember going to Swedish lessons as soon as I started, and um, it was funny because they got a brilliant scheme in Sweden where it's called SFE. So what's that in English? So it's like Swedish for immigrants is the translation. So it'll be a class. So people that immigrate into Sweden, so say from uh, Syria, for example, Yemen, these war-torn countries, they put on. So for so the benefit system in Sweden works differently to England. So in England, you can just get your benefits once you're sort of here and signed up. In Sweden, you get your benefits once you go to Swedish for immigrants, and you pass certain levels. So you have to show that you're actively trying to learn Swedish to be a sort of functioning member of society. So I would go into the class with all of the other people from there and sort of learn. I remember I was going 3-4 times a week, and then it was about 8-9 months I become okay. I was sort of conversational, but then moving to Elfsborg was good for me, because then everything was done in Swedish. All my teammates were pretty much Swedish. There weren't very many English speaking people there, so it really tested me. So I'd say that was the time I became fluent.
And your career at Elfsborg spanned, I think, 2-3 seasons, but you did have a loan spell with Lillestrøm in the Norwegian Premier.
Yeah.
Again, as you reflect back on that 2-3 years after Ostersunds, I know you mentioned there it wasn't kind of great to start with at Elfsborg, but was it a success, or were you happy to kind of move on and away from Sweden at the end of that period?
Yeah, I was done after that time. Lillestrøm, oh, that's another player, Gams Pedersen. I played against in Norway. So he was at the end
Vintage
of his
Premier
career.
player.
Yeah, he couldn't move, but his left foot was still as good as you could imagine. So it just made me think about that. So yeah, I went on loan there, but yeah, by the time I was sort of done with Sweden, I felt like I'd accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish there. I wanted sort of something new, um, and just sort of experience more, because I sort of knew what Sweden had to offer, and
Yeah.
because my time at Elfsborg wasn't as perfect as maybe I'd wanted it to go. It sort of coincided with that, and I thought, okay, I want to try something new, something different.
Fair. You had a brief spell. I won't go too much into this, but you had a brief spell in Kuwait as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I
Going
loved
off
it
your
there.
Wikipedia page here, but were there any other kind of, what was that an experience like? Were there any other clubs kind of before you came back to England and re-signed for Wealdstone?
Yeah, so at the end, obviously, like I said, I wanted something new, and then the opportunity to go to Kuwait came up, and I thought, you know what, let's go for it, because it was something completely different to what I'd been used to, and I loved it there. I thought it was brilliant, completely new culture, Um, Amazing people, like completely backwards to how things work in Sweden, because Sweden, everything is, you have to be there on time. Everyone follows the rules. Everything's by the book. And in Kuwait, it's sort of just like, it's okay. So like if training's at 4 o'clock, I would get there at 3 o'clock. No one would rock up there until 4:15. And then we'd start training at 4:45 and people would be like, it's no rush, it's fine. So I had to get used to that. But yeah, that was good. And then COVID hit, so I was out there, and COVID hit, and that they were taking it a lot stricter than other countries. So then I sort of managed to get on one of the last flights out of Kuwait. Sort of grabbed my suitcase. I left loads of stuff there, loads of boots and stuff at the apartment I was at. Um, Come back to London, and yeah, COVID was a difficult time because that's where I think I come back in March, and I had sort of like 6 months off football. I was just sort of like running, keeping fit. But I remember I had a deal sorted for in Indonesia, which I was really excited for. But then that fell through because then new sanctions came in, and then it sort of got to October, and I was like, right, I haven't played football in 6 months. I need to do something here, and sort of put the feelers out. And then it was funny enough, Wealdstone invited me down, and I thought, you know what, it's perfect. Sort of at the time, I saw it as like, okay, this is temporary. I remember I signed non-contract. It was with Brennan and Maynard. I
Mhm.
signed non-contract, and I was like, right, just keep myself fit and playing at a good level. Obviously at National League, and I trained a bit in the summer with Connor Stevens, and
Mhm.
he mentioned like their playing style and said obviously they play really really good football, and so that's something that suited me, and yeah, that's what sort of drew me back.
Before we jump into then the second spell with the return to the National League, let's not talk clubs. Let's talk country.
Yeah,
Um, you, of course, are I think still Montserrat's most capped player. Is it about
yeah, that's right.
35 now? Just
Yeah, I think it
talk
is.
us
Yeah,
through
34. Yeah, 34, 35.
34, 35. Obviously, you mentioned at the start that your father was Caribbean by heritage.
Mhm.
But kind of talk us through how appearing for Montserrat and now captaining and being the most capped player, and just your experiences of playing international football.
Yeah, so I mean, they first come about. I think I was about 18 years old. I was playing in Northampton, and I think I was playing regularly at the time, and they called me up. And I remember my manager, Stuart Gray, he's at Fulham now. It's him at the
Hmm.
time. He sort of pulled me to one side and said, "Okay, they've come in for you. They want you to play." But then he sort of talked to me, or he dissuaded me, because he said, "Listen, there's a chance you could play for the England youth setup. If you go there, then you won't have a chance." And I remember, I think Pierce was the under 21 manager at the time, so he'd come and watch a few trainings, and I'd spoke with him a bit. Um, then obviously sort of things didn't go my way at Northampton, or I didn't play as well as I should have, and then they come in a few years later. I think it was just before I'd getting released, or just after I'd been released, and then I thought, oh, do you know what, it'll be a great experience. And it was, at the time, I remember, it's disastrous, like this, the organization, and it was just all a mess. So I played a couple of years, and then took a couple of years out, because I was like, this, I need to focus on my domestic football, and international, it was just all over the place. And then a couple of years later, they sort of revamped how they done things, and then everything was a lot more professional, and then it was, yeah, it was brilliant. I then, so for the last, oh, I made my debut 2010 or 2009, I think 2010. And so yeah, 15 years later, and it's been brilliant. Like, we had a group at the time, um, probably I'd say from 2014 to about 2019, where it was like we were all at sort of prime ages, all playing a really good level, all hungry, and we all got on like brothers, and we really took Montserrat from, I think we were second worst nation in the world in terms of
Wow.
world ranking, and we've shot us up 30, 40 places, which at the time was incredible. And yeah, so I feel a completely different feeling playing for Montserrat, because you don't do it for money, for fame, to increase your career. You're literally doing it for your heritage and sort of who you are and what your family's gone through to sort of get you. So I spoke at length with my nan about how she come to this country, and the story was unbelievable, and it sort of fills me with pride that I'm allowed to or able to sort of add to that story through playing football. So it's something
That's
that's really
awesome.
important to me.
That's awesome. How are you doing for time? Because I'm conscious we've already gone
Yeah, no,
through
no, no, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. That's
You're
why
good.
no, that's why I picked this time. I'm good. I'm good.
Fair. Okay. Cool. So let's go back then to club, and post COVID. Obviously, Stones got promoted back to the National League, main, at the end of the COVID season through points per game, and you make your second Wealdstone debut. Just over 10 years after the first one, 11th of October 2020, away at Dagenham and Redbridge. I think a game that was on BT Sport at that point, 1-0 defeat.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, just talk us through again how that came about. Dean Brennan obviously was in charge, supported by Stuart Maynard at that point. And how did it feel coming back to Wealdstone 10 years later with the club in a very different place to what you left it?
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, so my manager, Welling manager from before, Jamie Day, I sort of sent a message to him because I'd lost all contact with people in England, but he used to regularly message me when I was out in Sweden. And so I messaged him, I said, I'm back, I need a club. Can you put the feelers out? And then, yeah, then I had a few other messages from different clubs. I can't remember who at the time, but then Wealdstone come in, and I thought that it would be like, I almost owe it to Wealdstone. I could go to some of these other clubs where maybe they're better clubs or higher profile, but then I felt like it's like a full circle. Like in my head at the time, I was like, okay, it's going to be a sort of temporary thing. I want to give my performances to the club that helped me so much. But then yeah, so I ended up back, and it was a strange feeling because all the people were the same. It was crazy. So like when I
Mm-hmm.
remember my first home game, I can't remember. I don't know if it was Wrexham the first home game. I can't remember my first home game, but after coming back, but I remember I turned up and it was all the same people that I saw 10 years ago, and I thought that was incredible because I thought, oh, it's going to be a whole new overhaul. It's going to just be brand new people because there's high turnover at clubs. Like that's how football is. But then to see the same sort of people on the board, see the same fans, to see the same, because it's different because you don't really know fans when you're at Elfsborg. There's so many fans. It's almost like you don't connect to anyone. You can't pick out a ginger in the crowd, for example. So it's like coming back and seeing those same people with the same passion, and then obviously seeing the club in a better state at a better level with better facilities and things like that. It was amazing. It was really humbling, and yeah, it was amazing.
And that first season, which was the 2020-2021 season,
Yeah.
was a difficult one because, of course, it was behind closed doors for the most part. The National League made the decision. Obviously, a lot of the leagues below that got curtailed. There was no relegation. Dean Brennan left halfway through the season. Just again, share your reflections on that first season, which was, especially in the latter part of the season, a real struggle.
I remember at the start it was mental because so many games were getting called off, and it was such carnage. I remember we didn't start that great. No, the first couple of games, so we lost to Dagenham and Redbridge, and then I think we drew to Yeovil away, and then I could play the third game or something like that, because my registration hadn't come through. But
Yeah,
then I remember I remember we won 5 or 6 in a row, or six
yeah,
out of seven or something, and we were second in the league. And
yeah.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, what's going on here? And I remember Brenner was talking, and he was like, listen, we're going to we need to finish in the playoffs. Like if we win this, we're second. And he was always thinking, right, we're gonna be up there, we're gonna be up there. Then I think, but it was like we'd played 4 games more than other teams, and then when it was carnage, and there was no fans. Yeah, it was carnage. But then I think around Christmas, that's where it sort of fell off a little bit. And yeah, the second half of the season, obviously, then Breno left, and then Shu came in, and there was a lot of chaos off the pitch, and we had a sort of change in playing style. And then I remember the dressing room was a bit fragmented because obviously some of the players had loyalties to Dean, others didn't have any loyalties. Some had loyalties to Stu, so it was yeah, it was a tough time the second half of the season. And I remember I think we still stayed out of the relegation zone on
Mhm.
points, but I
Yeah.
think halfway through the season we knew that we couldn't get relegated. So then it was sort of like we could play with a bit of freedom.
Mhm.
But I remember it was a bit chaotic in the sort of middle part of the season, and then the last few games, I think we were better. I think the last game of the season, I think we beat Woking, if I remember
Working
right.
4-2, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we beat Woking, and we played really, really well. Like we played some really good football, and then that was sort of the feeling that then would go into the next season. And obviously
Mhm.
they heavily recruited and um, changed the playing staff to suit the style that they wanted to implement. And then yeah, the next season then started a lot better.
It dawned on me, and you might laugh, you might scoff at this, but sort of almost the synergies between Wealdstone under Stuart Maynard, and you've referenced there the particular playing style with Ostersunds, almost a small fish in a big pond playing in a certain way. Did you feel that under Stuart Maynard? Was it almost kind of going through that same experience that you went through under Graham, obviously at a
A-
relative level?
Absolutely, absolutely, unequivocally. And I think what makes me appreciate it more now was the fact that okay, I was in the perfect system, playing the perfect style of football that suited me, and then I decided to leave for the bigger and the better club, and it didn't. In terms, yeah, you can say financially it worked out, but then in terms of the purity of football and what I love about football, it didn't. Then that made me then think, okay, the grass isn't always greener, and that's what sort of made me stay because they had a very clear concise vision of how they want to play football and a true, actually deep rooted belief. Because a lot of managers will say, okay, we want to play football this certain way, we want to be possession based. Every manager wants to be possession based and dominate and win the ball back high. But then when things start going against you, if your beliefs change, then it wasn't really a belief to begin with. It was sort of an ideal. So then being aligned with a manager that's sort of like, okay, this is how we truly believe is the best way to play football. I was like, okay, and there come times in the summer where okay, I can go for more money to a better club or things like that. But then I was like, I've set things up off the pitch where I'm not just solely dictated by money. And then it's like the purity of football and what I love, this type of football I love to play. That's what sort of locked me. And then, like you say, there is a nice thing about being the underdog that plays amazing football compared to these big clubs that just sort of like going away to a Wrexham and playing around them and stuff like that when their budget's 10, 15, 20 times ours. There's a certain satisfaction that comes from that because when you're on the pitch 11v11 man against man and you're getting out footballed, it's not a nice feeling regardless of if you're on X amount of money a month. And then after the game you can sit and be like, oh well, but I'm getting paid this, so it's fine. But when you're actually on the pitch in the midst of it, it's not nice. So that feeling of satisfaction when you out football a team, and which we were doing pretty much every week, and sometimes yeah, games go against you and you might lose it, but when you know that you've out footballed the team, there's a certain satisfaction that comes with that.
When you re-signed for the club in 2020, did you expect you'd be here 4 years later?
No way, not a chance. Not a chance. But
So
I,
what is it that keeps you coming back?
the style of football, like I said, was the main thing, and then just the culture we've been able to. But like I said, it was a bit fragmented when I first come back. But then the dressing room now, I'm at an age now where I understand what's actually important about football, and it's like I was always okay. We have to, and I still am. We have to win at all costs, and it's important to win. You don't want to be a loser in life, but there's a certain when I look back at my career and I think about, okay, what is the most important things that I've taken from my career? It's the relationships, it's the interpersonal stuff. It's like digging in with people, being in the trenches with people that you care about. Yeah, it's the bonds and connections you form with your teammates and with your manager and with the club and with the fans. That's the stuff that actually matters. It's not so much okay, I just want to win games of football, which is
Mhm.
sort of the byproduct. So then I just look at every day when I go in, and you will know if you ask any of the players, I'm the happiest player to be there just because I understand that this doesn't last forever, and being around like-minded people great people that you can have fun with and enjoy the social bonds. I don't believe I can recreate it elsewhere. So that's a strong determinant over why I decide to stay here. And yeah, I think if you would ask me 10 years ago, that's not strong enough for me to stay at a club, because I was in grind mode and I was like, right, I need to make the most out of my career. But now
Mhm.
when I look at it, it's like, okay, well, the choice is always there as a footballer to go elsewhere. What will I get from going elsewhere, and will it outweigh what I get here? So
Fair. I'll ask you another question that I probably know the answer to. Obviously, just over a year ago, then Stu took his opportunity, went to Notts County. You know where this is going. Alex Dyer's one game in charge, most successful statistically Wealdstone manager, 100% win record. But just talk to us a little bit about that Halifax game where you took the reins, supported by Rory, Cookie, Max.
mm.
How did that play out? How did it come about? How did you react to it? Did you enjoy it?
I'll be honest, the only part I enjoyed was the football bits. So the actual game I loved, the training sessions loved for the most part, but all the other stuff, it was like a whirlwind. It was just, obviously all the stuff had happened, and then I'm the sort of person that if I'm doing anything, I'm doing it to the absolute maximum of my ability, because I look at things and it's like, if I'm stood there and then essentially this is my team. So I'm getting I see it as whatever this team do is a reflection of me as a person. So then it's like, me as a person, I always want to have high standards, and I want to be hungry. I want to be the best that I could possibly be. So that sort of pressure that I put myself under, I was like, oh my God, I'm in something that I'm completely foreign to, which was chaotic, and it's not something I even wanted, because I don't have a lust to be a football manager. But um, I have a very strong relationship with Rory, with the club, and it was at a time where we didn't have a replacement set up at the time, so it was a chaotic period. And it's like, okay, well, I could have just turned around and been like, well, I'm a football player, so it's got nothing to do with me. You lot sort it out. But
Mhm.
I'm not that sort of person. And when people close to you are in, not the shit, but in the eye of the storm, it's like, are you going to help them, or are you going to be the person to turn your back on them? So that's where I sort of like, because I knew the players at the time, they respected me and my role in the group, that I knew what I could get out of them. Like the training sessions, I thoroughly enjoyed, because that's football, that's what I know. Team selection, we were lucky at a time where we had sort of like, the team was established and we only had a few decisions to make. But yeah, on the match day, I loved it, because in a weird way, even though it was only a couple of weeks, I knew they were my team. So I knew on that day, regardless if it was win, loss, draw, whatever happened, I was like, they are going to be an accurate reflection of who I am. So that's where it was sort of extremely enjoyable, because, and then the way they played, it was deeply, deeply satisfying. And
Mhm.
result aside, and obviously we got the result, which was amazing. Um, but yeah, I loved it. The actual day of it, but then I know I only experienced the top 1% of being a football manager, in terms of, you got a team with you that have complete buy-in, um, that are familiar with you, will give everything for you. You scored 2 goals, you conceded no goals, the fans were with you, um, and you won the game. I know that I'm not naive enough to think that, okay, well, that's how it's always going to be. And for me, it's never like, the trade off is, I know what football managers go through, and the trade off, I was having sleepless nights, and it's just like, and I've got no dog in the fight almost. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
even a manager, so the pressure and that's why I have new respect for managers and what they do and what they go through.
So let me kind of then ask you the other side of that coin is probably then what happened afterwards with the appointment of David Noble, who lasted 74 days, whatever it was.
Mm.
What went wrong in that period that pushed us so close to that trapdoor?
It's always hard. I think it's always hard. Like, Stu and Matty were outstanding for us, and they were very. They'd been there for 3 years, so I think there's always a period of sort of, it's a bit tumultuous when you lose a manager that's been there for a while, and you lose them in a successful way. It's different when you lose a manager and it's in an unsuccessful way. Then things need to change. But then where things didn't need to change, and then he come in and there was sort of, obviously there was variation in how he wanted to do things, and I think the coaching staff maybe weren't aligned as they maybe could have been, but it was just, I think it was just one of those things where he was at St Albans and they were doing a brilliant job. They were just outside the playoffs,
Yeah.
so it was working there. But sometimes, remember, he was a player there, so he had the familiarity of the club, of the players, and things like that. And then coming to a different club when you don't have that, it's then difficult. But I don't know what I could put my finger on. I'd put it more on that Stu and Matty were exceptional at what they done, and they were very, very, very distinct in what they done. If they had been general managers that are sort of like, right, work hard, hit the chat, like if they were just normal managers that played a normal style of football, then you can interchange with whatever manager you want. But they were so obsessive in the work that they done, in their analysis, in how they wanted us to play. They were um so detailed and obsessive about it. It's then hard to then replace that like for like, if you know what I mean.
So that story, that season does finish with a happy ending because Sam Cox comes in. We win 3 of those last 5 games. A picture that I really enjoy was this one. After Dylan De Silva scored the winner in that Chesterfield game.
Chesterfield,
a game that we were hugely under the cosh. We absorbed pressure and then got that goal towards the end. What changed? What did Sam bring in those final 5 games to see us stay up?
I think it was almost a free. He was extremely detailed. He's very. This is exactly what I want from you, and like I said, that breeds confidence in players when you know, okay, this is exactly my job. I think the senior players, we stepped up and we were like, okay, it's not solely down to the manager, and we just sort of grouped and we were like, we're not getting relegated. We sort of just decided through how we trained and how we approached the games. We would just give everything, and it's surprising when you give absolutely everything. Sometimes you think you're giving everything, but you're not until you get the external pressure of, okay, shit might hit the fan here. And then we just sort of get clicked into another level. I mean, we were 2-0 down against
Dorking,
2-0 down in the second half. So it's like, that is not to do with football. It's not to do with tactics or structure. That's to do with, okay, like digging in. And even the Chesterfield game, we looked at the last 5 games and we sort of wrote off Chesterfield in a way. But then we sort of went into the game. We're like, listen, well, let's work as hard as we possibly can. And you never know. And then sort of like dawned on us. And I think Sam was just he's inspirational as a character. He's very like, he took his job very, very seriously. And I think it just worked. It was a bit freer and it was a bit like players take more responsibility because we knew that Sam's not an experienced manager like that. But he done a great job in the 5 games. Obviously, we won and managed to stay up, which was a great feeling.
And of course, almost continuing that, Matt Taylor came in this season, and I got the impression he was very well liked and respected amongst the players. But he's of course gone, and this continued theme over the last sort of 12 months of instability has kind of now seen us, we're in the shit again, right? So I guess how are we going to stay up again this season?
I think we need to accept where we are, number one, because we can say that, okay, because a lot of teams, they come to Wealdstone, they play against us, and like there was a lot of results where it would be this tight, we'd lose 1-0, they'd shake our hands and be like, oh, you lot are too good to be down there, and blah blah blah, and yeah, no, you lot will be fine because yeah, you're really good. I think we need to accept that we're in the shit and we're there for a reason. Like, regardless of if we say it's injuries or change of manager or whatever, we are where we are because we should be, because that's what the table reflects. And I think once we understand that deeply enough, I think we'll be fine, because then, like I said, the external, it then clicks you into another gear. That you do one of 2 things. You either shrink because, oh my God, this is scary, we might get relegated, and you think of that, or you think, okay, I'm not letting that happen. So whatever it takes now. So now I think we just need to go into emergency mode. Every minute of every game is an emergency. It's like we can't switch off for 1 minute and concede a sloppy goal. And the beauty of football, the good and bad thing of football is that it changes so quickly. So for example, if we win five of our next 6 games, for example, then we're out of it, and it's like, oh my god, like yeah, we're good. And the same way you could be mid-table, lose 6 in a row, and then you're looking over your shoulder, like last season for us, and it's like, oh, we're in the shit now. How did this happen? So we need to treat it for what it is, understand where we are, and just know that, well, we've got the confidence to know that, okay, well, we've made it out of this before. We've got enough in the dressing room. If we keep saying that to each other, we know we've got enough in the dressing room. Well, now's the time to actually prove it.
So for you personally this season, I know you've struggled with injuries over the last few weeks, and minutes have been rather scarce over the last 2 to 3 months. For you this season and beyond, what remains, and what are Alex Dyer's ambitions and wants in football moving forwards?
My ambition now is to enjoy football as much as I can. Like that's the sole importance. Football's given so much to me, and it's been so much for me that how I'm almost at the stage of my career where I'm like, how dare I not enjoy every moment of it? So every moment of training, every moment of every match day, regardless of if I'm playing, if I'm not playing, how can I find a way to enjoy what I'm doing right now? Because that's truly what matters. I know I've got to the stage where I know myself as a character, because I used to think that, well, if I enjoy football, then that means I don't care as much about the result. And I'm like, oh, if we lose, I don't care. Whereas now I know myself well enough as a person, whereas I know I can enjoy something to the max. And I know I'm still going to give absolutely everything to then get the result, because that's just who I am. If we're playing a five-a-side game, if we're playing Chesterfield to stay up in the league, for me, it's exactly the same, because that's just who I am. So um, I'm more towards the side of just enjoy every moment, because in football, like life's nothing's promised, so you don't know when your last game's going to be. So it's more like going back. It's almost like full circle to, okay, well, why did I start playing football when I was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old? And it's like I trying to carry that exuberance into now. So if you ask me in terms of my goals, how many games do I want to play, how many goals I want to score, where do I want us to finish in the league? For me, that doesn't apply anymore. Me, it's just the day to day. How much can I get out of it?
I'll finish then with one sort of final question, which is maybe just a look back across your 2 spells, and just kind of ask you if there's one memory, one game from your Stones career that stands out. What is it?
I know a lot of fans say it to me, and it's probably been forced upon, but probably White Hawk. I would say White Hawk
Was that
away.
the league game that you scored in?
Yeah.
Why that one? Was that for you personally?
Yeah, it was a nice goal, and it was at a time where it was an important goal, because I think we were just going to stay in the playoffs. I can't remember the exact thing about it, but I remember it was a nice goal. What are other Wealdstone moments? Oldham was a big one last season,
The last
because
day game.
yeah, last game of the season last year. That I would say the most recent one, because I don't know, because we knew we only really needed a draw and we'd be okay, and it would be a thing. But then to go there and outplay them the way that we did, and to win the game, that was a big one. Yeah.
Brilliant. Alex, we've spoken for just over an hour now. They say time flies when you're having fun. It's been a real pleasure to sit and chat to you, and thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. Do you have anything else you want to add before we close on?
No, I want to say thanks, because I enjoyed this as well, because it's nice to sort of sit back and reflect, and nice to do it with someone that obviously you've done a hell of a lot of research, and I really appreciate you, and obviously the people that have taken an interest in my career, because it does mean a lot. But like, you've told me things that I don't even know about my about my career, so I appreciate like the detail of work that you've gone into, and you haven't just done this sort of off the cuff. So that's really nice of you, and thanks obviously with the StoneCast listeners as well, and um, obviously you lot know how much the club mean to me, so it's nice to do things like this.
all we ask for is 3 points at Yeovil on Saturday, please.
Please, you and me both.
Cool. Okay. Well, I say we'll wrap up there. We've got next week is the next sort of normal StonesCast recording where I have to shake my head at this. The K unit, which is the youth, have taken over the panel. So you'll have a kids cast, youth cast next week, where they'll chew over Yeovil and look ahead to the games with Braintree and a run of very, very important fixtures coming up. But from me, Adam Hills and Alex, thank you again for joining us. We'll bid you a good day and up the Stones.
Cheers.